Hey, this is Stacia, and today we're going to continue the opening repertoire. So this is video number 2. And I want to start off with Scholar's Mate, and especially the Scholar's Mate sidelines. Now, some of you guys are rolling your eyes. You're like, oh, Scholar's Mate, that's so easy. And probably more than half of you that are rolling your eyes right now don't understand that you actually can play this way. And actually probably 80% of you don't know that. You can get a fine position playing Scholar's Mate. And even more of you, actually slightly less of you, don't understand that when you play aggressive and tricky, your opponent is more likely to make mistakes. And when they do, those mistakes are more likely to be fatal. So I think Scholar's Mate is a very foundational thing to do. Especially if you are playing an under 500 tournament, you must play for Scholar's Mate, okay? I'm sorry, you must play for it. Because someone might try to do it to you as well. The only way to truly understand it and know how to defend it is if you play it yourself. So that is why I'm recommending it. But you can also use it as like a sideline or side repertoire if you are at the higher levels. After you get over 1,500, then it's less viable. But at the lower levels, it is very viable. And it also reinforces attacks on F2 and F7, which is basically very critical to understand in chess. So that is why I'm recommending this. Let's get into it. So E4 is the move I recommend, and E5. All right, now after E5, don't forget that if they play something silly like C6, okay, it's not silly, it's the Caro-Kann. We take the center, right? If they play A6, we take the center, okay? So if they do anything weird, we will take the center, with the exception of D5. I want to take that, and after takes, we will play knight C3. And the other one that might be a little different is that if we go E4 and they attack it with this knight. So when a piece moves in chess, you should see what it's doing. Okay, if you play D4 here, you're going to lose a pawn, and pretty much for nothing, if you ask me. I don't think there's any compensation here at all. And trust me, I would sack that pawn if I could. So, when you see a move that attacks a pawn, think about what to do. Well, let's attack it. Let's attack the knight. They go here. That's called Alekhine's defense, and this is the main line for that as well. I'm not going to cover those in my opening repertoire because mostly what you're going to encounter is either pawn to E5 or pawn to C5 for my students. So after E4, we're going to mainly look at E5. So E5, and now we're going to play for our Scholar's Mate because Scholar's Mate is the most basic plan in chess. It's like the first plan to learn, so you better understand it well. The plan is the F7 pawn is weak. It's the only pawn protected only by the king. There's only 2 other pawns that are sort of weak, and that would be the G7 pawn and the B7 pawn. Why? Because they're only protected by a bishop. That's important to know because, let's say this bishop comes to C5, that pawn becomes unprotected. So moves like Queen G4 become an idea, right? That would attack the pawn. And if they move this, let's say this comes out and this bishop comes out, well, then moves like Queen B3 become a move because that pawn's unprotected. So you got to understand these things in chess, right? That this pawn's only protected by these bishops, and this pawn's only protected by the king. So we are going to target it. Now, how do we do that? Well, clearly bishop C4 would target it, but also Queen H5. So we are going to coordinate on F7, and what we would love is to just give checkmate. So if black does absolutely nothing, if they just play like random, we will play here and here, and then we will give checkmate. Don't take with the bishop, okay? I played with my food as a kid, but I don't think you should. Because they survive. Why let them survive? Let's just give checkmate, okay? Checkmate. So, that is the plan. Now, of course, black can do stuff to stop this, and black can defend, and that is why I'm going to cover these sidelines. But I even have a good main line for us, so get ready for that. So all of this is justified because I have a main line too. So e4, e5. And now bishop c4 I don't recommend. Okay, if you are under 500 or whatever, if you don't want to play for Scholar's Mate, play this. Play knight to f3. This is our main repertoire. And this attacks a pawn, and it's just the best move. It's going to lead to the Italian game and some fun gambits. So let's go ahead and play knight f3 if you really don't want to do Scholar's Mate. But if you're going for Scholar's Mate, we don't play bishop c4. Why? After bishop to c4, Black could have no idea what's going on at all and play knight to f6 because their coach taught them that. Get the knight out, get the bishop out, and castle. And already you can see that we don't have queen h5 anymore because it will lose a queen. So let's not do that, right? So that is why I actually recommend queen to h5 first. It's trickier and it's a bit more direct because on queen h5, we're applying pressure here. And if your opponent kind of knows Scholar's Mate, but they're scared of it, they might make a bad mistake right away. But even if they are so focused on that, they might not see that we're also attacking a pawn. So this is a little bit of a fork, right? We apply pressure on f7, but we also attack the e5 pawn, which is currently unprotected. So let's look at some of the worst moves Black could do. The correct move is knight to c6. That would protect the pawn and develop a piece. That's pretty good. But let's look at the worst ones. The worst one I've ever seen, and I've seen it several times, is king to e7. That is the worst move you could possibly play because now we take the pawn and it's checkmate. I mean, that's just tragic. Okay, so yeah, if they play king e7, you win in one move. That's why we play this way, right? Now, if queen h5 and they are confused and they play g6, hoping to block the attack, like they're like, oh, I've seen Scholar's Mate, I'm going to play g6 and block it. Yeah, guess what? Now we're winning. Queen takes e5. Not only are we winning a free pawn, but we're checking the king and attacking the rook at the same time. That means we're going to win the rook. That's a fork. If they block with a bishop, we take. Now the knight is pinned. It can't move. Probably the best move is king f8, which is just so sad. And if they take with a knight, it's sort of the same story. We're going to take, and now the bishop's pinned. And we're also taking h7, and this is completely winning, okay? So we're winning. So the most challenging move, which is still winning for us, is queen to e7. Queen to e7 at least hints at some counterplay for Black. Because I have seen some of my students get afraid here and take the queen. Taking the queen is a complete blunder. Why are you trading queens when you can take a free rook? Okay, gotta follow my rule, always take free stuff. So we take the free rook and we allow them to win a pawn with check. Okay, so we're up a lot of material here, right? We want a pawn and we want a rook. They want a pawn and we're in check. So if they're not checkmating us, then I think we're okay. And I don't know if you ever heard this before, but the queen can't checkmate by herself. Okay, so that's not going to happen. And our rook is not open. We did not play g3. So here I'm going to recommend a really fun move. If you played this in a game, I would not be upset. They might grab a pawn, but who cares? They're just moving their queen around now, and we're going to grab a knight. So if you play that, that's fine, but I definitely recommend this move, bishop to e2. We're going to be a little tricky still because we're undefending that pawn like I was talking about, right? So they could take it. Oh no, our rook. Well, now we have a really nice move. Bishop to f3. This creates something called a construction. The construction is the bishop protects the rook through the queen even. The rook protects the knight protects the bishop, the rook protects the pawn, the king protects the pawn. We do the hokey pokey and we pull our, okay, no, we don't. I hate the hokey pokey. Okay, but anyway, you get the point. The queen is attacked and she can't do anything. She can't do anything at all. Now if she goes here, we take, that wins. She only has this move and that is in line with our bishop. So now you're very tempted to go d4, but please don't go d4 right away because your bishop's unprotected and she could simply take with check. So please don't do that. Instead, I definitely recommend the following move. If you don't remember this and you just take a free knight, that's totally winning. That's fine. You can take a free knight, but I really like the move knight to c3. And I'm just saying I'm going to go d4, get all my pieces out, and attack the queen. And, 9 times out of 10, they don't even see, that the queen is attacked. When you play d4 in under 500, they don't see it. So we've covered that line. So after e4, e5, queen h5, we covered king to e7, which loses immediately, and we covered g6, which hangs a fork. Oops. So the next move to look at is knight to f6. If knight to f6, this attacks our queen. Okay, well, you've got to see that, right? Don't hang your queen. But now we just execute the point of this move, which is, yay, pawn. We take a free pawn. That's check. And I have to tell you, if they play something like queen e7, now we do trade queens because we're going to follow that principle that says if you're up material, trades are good. And that's true here. Let's take that queen and say we're up a pawn. Our pawn's attacked, but we can defend it. I would probably just play d3 or knight c3. I like knight c3 because I think the bishop wants to come out here, and d3 blocks it. Okay, so that's all you do there. You're a pawn up, okay? This is an opening repertoire, and I got you up a pawn, so don't complain. All right, so knight f6 is no good either. So now we're going to get into some other moves. This next one is kind of fun. A lot of people will be like, oh, I understand Scholar's Mate. I'm going to play knight h6, right? Because now we play bishop c4, and we're pressuring this. We're pressuring this a lot. And now maybe they go here or something, and they think they're all set. But it's here that we decide how to deal with this move, because it's a simple remove the defender tactic. If there's a piece defending a square, let's try to get rid of it, right? Let's try to get rid of that piece. Well, not so easy, right? There's nothing that can capture it at the moment. However, the knight is in line with our bishop. The bishop on c1 is targeting the knight. There's only one problem, there's a pawn in the way. That is why I recommend the move d4. You could play d3, and that's sneaky, but it's a less forcing move, right? The move on d3 might allow them to simply castle. But if you play d4, okay, you are attacking their bishop. Now if they castle, they're going to lose a bishop. Okay, that's not so good. Probably shouldn't do that, right? So a lot of times, when they see this move, they'll be like, oh, great, I can take, cool, d4. I can just take this. Yeah, well, good luck with that. Now we take the knight. This is the whole point, right? We open this up and we take the knight. Now the defender of f7 is gone. If they take back, we simply play queen takes f7. We get our checkmate. So yeah, so anytime they play knight to h6, you want to go for this d4 idea. And you want to give mate on f7. So knight h6 is actually no good. They shouldn't play that way. All right, so what else can they do? Well, next things they can do is protect with the queen. That is possible as well. If they protect with the queen, they can do so with either queen e7 or queen f6. Both moves will protect the f7 pawn. If they go queen e7, we don't have anything great here. But it is kind of funny because we made a pretty suspicious queen move, and now they made a pretty suspicious queen move. It blocks the bishop, and it blocks the knight, and yeah, it's just like the queen doesn't necessarily belong here unless they're going to castle queenside, which I guess they could do. So probably here, what I would recommend is that we just continue with bishop c4. You never know if they'll try something silly and move their queen away and hang checkmate. That's not checkmate yet, but it still looks pretty good for us, because now we can try to remove that defender of the bishop. Okay, but anyway, if you can ever take an f7 and it's not checkmate, still take it. That's the point. Okay, so I think here, though, probably after bishop c4, let's say they just play knight c6. They can do that. That protects the pawn again. And I think here we just go knight to c3. And this is going to be our main go-to, because if the queen comes to e7 or f6, that is subject to knight to d5, right? So like, for example, let's say they go, this can get complicated actually. But I do want to show this because after knight to d4, they're threatening c2 with a fork. And I don't want you to be afraid to play this move. This follows my rule, always retreat. Okay, our scholar's mate failed. They defended it. But they defended it at what cost? Their bishop's blocked, their queen's on a weird square, their knight's out too early. Like, they're not playing normal moves, so we can punish this. We didn't play a normal move either, but now we take it back. Queen d1. And this follows my rule, always retreat. And this position is totally playable, okay? It really is. We guard the threat, and now we're going to go knight f3 and play our normal way. And it's totally fine because they did this. So they did this, and they did this, and this. You know, so they're playing weird moves, so we can afford to play some weird moves. But now we're going to play normal and be very comfortable. And this position is like at least equal, and you'll be just fine. And probably you'll have time on the clock. All right, so I like queen d1 in a lot of cases, so definitely remember that one. And if they go queen to f6, now I like knight c3 even better, because we are threatening knight to d5, attacking this stuff. So like, for example, let's say they go g6, okay? Now we play my rule, always retreat, queen d1, okay? Just come back home is totally fine. And it took me a long time to understand that the queen's actually very good on d1. I know it seems weird, but her home square is not so bad, actually. She still has access to all these squares, and in the event we play c3 at some point, which we will, the queen has access to all these squares. And she also supports the d4 break in the center. She's actually well placed here. So if we make a dubious move and they make a dubious move, we can afford to come back. And then if they come back, we play normal chess. We play normal chess from there, because they did play g6, which is a little weird. So, okay, that's basically my recommendation there. So queen d1, and let's say they just go here. They just want a castle. I like this move now. Now we attack the queen, and we threaten the fork. And like, trust me, a lot of people will blunder. They'll blunder horribly. Sometimes they'll play this, queen e6. Okay, now we fork the king and the rook. No, just kidding, that's a queen. Let's take that. So they attack our knight, we take a queen. All right, so they will blunder that way sometimes. And if they do something else, like, what do they do? I mean, let's say they go, oops. Let's say they go queen d6. Okay, that does protect the pawn. Now they're blocking their d pawn. Now the d pawn cannot protect the d5, or I'm sorry, the e5 pawn, opening up the bishop. So now they're going to have to spend a lot more time to play b6 and bishop b7. So that's already pretty fine position as well. I'm not going to say it's good, but it's definitely very playable and totally fine. So I'm just trying to explain some of the things going on in the positions. If they do defend with the queen, it's totally fine. Like, it will work. But we have a totally playable position with some ideas, including knight c3. Now, the last thing then is what happens if they play correctly. So after e4, e5, and queen h5, they could play d6. Okay, that protects the pawn. This is the correct way to play. It's very simple, actually. We play queen h5, right? Like e4, e5, we play queen h5. We're attacking a pawn. They should defend it. It's very simple. And a lot of people don't, but they should. So d6 is totally fine move. We will play bishop c4 and continue our attack. Now we're threatening scholar's mate. And this is sort of what happens a lot, is they'll play knight to f6, attacking our queen. But now, checkmate, game over. And that's why we play this way, because you will get some quick wins. But it's also tricky if they defend. So that's why we're doing this. So the other thing is e4, e5, queen h5. Let's say they go knight c6. We play bishop c4. Same thing. If they go knight f6, checkmate. Okay, and so now they have to defend correctly. And the way they defend correctly is g6. And then we're going to renew the threat with queen f3. Now, if they don't pay attention, they'll get checkmated. So they have to do something about that. So knight to f6 blocks the checkmate, just like in the opera game. And now I think we're going to have to go into the main lines. So I'll save that for another video. But I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something from this. I mean, I think it's so important to understand like these plans and the common defenses and just know what you're doing when you're in these positions. So I hope this helped you guys, and I'll be back with more chess. Okay, bye.